the main issue that we've been concerned about. I think in terms of the sort of contagion issue, I think that's potentially less of an issue, although we are obviously concerned about dangerous content. I mean, clearly there is dangerous content in terms of areas like eating disorders and pro-ana sites, etc. I think most young people are increasingly sophisticated about how they negotiate and navigate the online world, but I think we need more. This is where education is particularly important, and recognizing how potentially to see the quality of information and the sort of whether the information that they get should be sort of scrutinized more carefully. But I think the other area that's important is that it breaks down some of the stigma of seeking help. So we do know that in terms of sort of lowering the threshold for help seeking, this is really important, and this is where digital, I think, can really come to the fore.
Yeah, and it means that those who have a more unusual mental health disorder could potentially access peers or tailored support that they wouldn't have access to within their own local network.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think we see this. I mean, one of our areas of work in neurodevelopmental disorders, we have a clinic for young people with tic disorders, which is really poorly provided in terms of a lot of local provision around the country, very uneven, and having both digital resources and a telemedicine service allows us to work with local clinicians, but also for young people not to have the postcode lottery, so they can access support remotely. And I think that's a different way of working than we've tended to have in the past. And I think that it just needs to be, we need to have the mechanisms that support and fund that type of approach, and also provide essentially young people with the kind of resources that they can also do more self-management as well. I think for but the difficulty they have at the moment is really understanding what can be trusted, and this is where, say, the NHS is really important in terms of being because young people do trust the information that they get from the NHS.
Yeah, I think what you said there is hugely important for areas with a big geographical area like Scotland, because it would mean that specialist support would be available even in rural areas. So potentially really important for us up here. Okay, better move on to some questions from the audience. We've got a question here from Alison Howard. I'll just read it out in case anyone can't see the chat. Although moral panics have surrounded technological advancement previously, that is when TV first became widely used or when the internet became more widely used, would you say that smartphones specifically have the additional issue of their role in how we communicate, particularly as more features or apps are added to them?
Yes, that's a really good question, and it is how the technology is both sort of similar in a sense as a new technology, and it tends to be that older generations like my own, tend not to understand it and just see negative impacts and think it's sort of turning young generation to rack and ruin. In fact, they're huge benefits. I mean, particularly young people who feel quite isolated or socially isolated, or not having a peer group that they can connect with online has been very important. But I think it's the sense that it's both not it's bidirectional communication, and it really is almost sort of continuously on. So it's very difficult to switch it off. I guess the issue that we often concerned about is the underlying design of a lot of the technology. Particularly where the underlying model is to increase usage, because where the funding model is often supported by advertising and the amount of time, the amount of clicks that young people use, there is a tendency to have the design done in a way which isn't particularly responsible for young people, particularly those who have mental health difficulties, and that's the issue. So sometimes it's understanding that young people with pre-existing problems are particularly sensitive to these issues and some of the overuse issues, which are really built into the design of the technology. And I think what we need to think about is how that technology could be designed more responsibly and offer potentially sometimes low-level support for young people who are experiencing distress while they're using it.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. And we've got about 2 minutes left just for another question. This is from Donald McIntyre. Is a separate digital mental health strategy likely to be helpful, or does technology-enabled care need to be integrated into an overall strategy?
Well, that's a great question, and I'd probably say yes to both, because the second part is yes, we absolutely need to blend it in. I think digital is going to be, it's another tool, and I think what I'm concerned about is sometimes I see digital providers that is the only tool they have in their toolbox, when what we need to do is essentially see digital as a normal part of care, but blended with other forms of care. On the other hand, the strategy for digital, we've tended to think about digital strategies in terms of healthcare records and informatics. We haven't thought about it in terms of digital services. And also this strategy that we probably hear about later today of personal data, and how that can be used intelligently and thoughtfully to support mental care decision making. But the strategy of the platforms for delivering these interventions, I really do think that is lacking at the moment. And it's just not possible for an individual healthcare organization or service really to do this on their own. And I think this is something potentially in Scotland, which I think you probably have more opportunities to do well than in England, because of thinking about the sort of whole system, rather than sort of individual silos of delivery.
Okay, great. Thank you again, Prof. Hollis, for your talk today. We'll have to end the session there due to time. Next up is going to be virtual poster presentations in the sessions area.
Thank you very much.